Finally, a full slate of meaningful football. We only had to go without it for 1 week. Only a couple good games last week. Rob, how we doing? You ready for the playoffs, man?
I'm ready, man. I remember back to a year ago, right from now, where we started to do these playoff previews, and that's kind of what kicked off our Around the League show. So really excited to get back to this, back to our roots of this show, and really just dive into these games where we have some really good ones this weekend. So yeah, I'm ready to jump right in.
Absolutely. Birth of the ATL pod, the 2022
exactly.
playoffs. So here we are in 2023, man. And we're definitely going to do it before we preview these games. I want to get your thoughts on week 18, what took place. Obviously, we didn't record last week. We talked about the Hamlin stuff. It just didn't feel like it. Shout out to him. He's officially gone home and everything. But let me get your thoughts on week 18. There's only a couple meaningful games. If you don't have a lot to say, that's all right. And then we'll jump into these games. But how did you feel about the end of the NFL regular season?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, like you just said, shout out to Damar Hamlin and Bills Nation, and glad to hear that he's doing well, and the Bills are back on track here. But that was a crazy accident. Bengals handled it really well. Bills handled it really well. I thought the league handled it really well. So glad to see that everyone's okay. Just to recap week 18 real quick, and I'll go pretty quick here. Don't have many thoughts, kind of putting the NFL regular season behind me and behind this show for now. But just real quick recap. I'll rapid fire here. Packers completely blow it. They have a legitimate shot to get into the playoffs. And actually, I think if they got in the playoffs, we'd be looking at the NFC playoffs a little bit differently. They put a couple of wins together towards the end of the year, made a nice little run, and they looked like they were a potential contender again in the NFC, and then they just laid an egg against the Lions, and we know the Lions are a good team. I saw someone tweet, I forget what player it was on the Lions, but it was to the effect of, if we're not getting in, you guys aren't getting in either, and that's exactly what happened. So shout out to Lions Nation, but I was shocked to see that. Packers kind of just laid down, and that's kind of been the overview of their whole season. They just disappointed. We had high expectations for them. We had them as division winners in the NFC North, and they totally flopped and kind of put the exclamation point on the flop of the season last week against the Lions. One other prediction that we had that actually turned out to be true was the Titans, and the Titans totally just fell apart. 7 losses in a row to end the season, lose their shot at the playoffs. They were winning or leading that division for the entire season, and then the Jags just caught up to them right at the very end, took them out last week, secured a playoff berth, and secured the division. So that was really cool to see. We're seeing Trevor Lawrence really emerge as that quarterback we thought he would be. And it just makes the AFC that much scarier with all these young quarterbacks. Crazy thing I saw was Patrick Mahomes is the oldest quarterback in the playoffs in the NFC, or in the AFC, I'm sorry, which is just crazy to think about. He's 27 years old, and he's the oldest starting quarterback for any AFC playoff team, and they're all really good. You got Herbert, you got Burrow, you got Allen, you got Trevor Lawrence. The list goes on and on. The NFC is going to be a juggernaut for years and years to come. I want to give a quick shout out to the Steelers, particularly Mike Tomlin. I think a lot of people forget how good of a coach this guy really is. He's consistently competitive is a good way to put Mike Tomlin. Consistently competitive. He works with what he's got. They had a lot of holes to fill this year, and they did just enough to finish the season over 500. He keeps that streak going. He's never been under 500 as a coach, which is pretty amazing. It kind of speaks to, how valuable a good head coach is. So pretty cool to see there. And then last couple of points here. I want to figure out how to ask this correct. Do you think the Texans are the worst franchise in the NFL and ever?
The worst franchise ever? They've
the
got
way that they're run,
it is. They've got a smaller history, so that
they're making their case.
We're going back 20. Yeah, they are making the case. With about what I think 21 years of history at this point, was it 01, I think, or 01, 02,
something
around
like
that time they became a franchise. And dude, I don't understand them at all.
No.
Bill O'Brien, they won 4 straight division titles with Deshaun Watson just a couple of years ago. Like they ended that. Like that's how far removed we are from them losing to Mahomes in the AFC Championship, right? Or do they lose to them in the divisional round? Regardless, that was the game they're up 24-0 and ended up losing like 35-24 or something. Mahomes and them got hot. And it feels so far removed from that we're talking about them being the worst franchise ever.
Yeah,
and
I know.
they were just in Super Bowl contention for a couple back-to-back seasons about 4 or 5 years ago. So Bill O'Brien, what he did to that organization is truly criminal. Now, what they're doing to themselves currently, firing head coaches that A, were defensive minded, and B, had zero shot of winning more than 5 games. Like 5 wins would have been a massive, massive success for these head coaches. Like, to get 3 wins is good enough with that roster. They are so bad. I think we're forgetting how many draft picks and how poor of a salary cap situation that Bill O'Brien put them in. I think what he did to them throughout his tenure has spiraled them into absolute oblivion. Like, it's outrageous, the situation that they've been in. However, moving forward, they've made enough moves. They got I think it's the number 2 and number 12 pick this season. They've got a lot of rebuilding to do. But without they got to get a quarterback, because Deshaun Watson was the reason they got those titles. Bill O'Brien was decent offensively, but it was really Watson in his heyday is why they're able to overcome a bad roster and average coaching staff, because that roster was fairly average across the board. Like you had J.J. Watt, you had D-Hop, but when you look at it as a whole, those rosters had issues. The offensive line was horrendous. Watson, it's amazing he survived those few years there. Sounds like he had some outlets, but it's we'll let smart people catch that joke. But that's why they became successful. I think that era is why I sit here and go, okay, they're not the worst franchise. But the more I think about how they were ran in the middle of that and got here, there's definitely an argument to be made that they're probably the worst. Now that I think about it more, I mean, it's bottom 3. I mean, who's competing with them right now? Like I guess over the last decade, who's competing with them? The Jets for a time, they seem like they've turned a corner. I think Washington's a pretty piss poor franchise. For sure. I think they're terribly ran. Cleveland actually had some good roster construction. So, we could rattle off some of these teams, but there's definitely an argument to be made. I do want to compliment the Steelers organization, like you said, because that's a well-run organization. They do business differently, per Mike Tomlin, how he said that, and you see it pay off each and every year. That roster was not good. I did not think the Steelers roster coming into this season was not expected to be good at all. A winning season was borderline out of reach for about any other coach in this league. Trubisky's not it. Kenny Pickett, I don't think he looked that good at all this season. I don't think, I think if he can develop, maybe he's got some upside and they'll be fine with him. Their offensive scheme was terrible. The offensive line was terrible. They fired their OC, which I think is going to be positive for them. So for him to come out again above 500 is truly incredible. We talked about that, week 3 or week 4, it felt like the Steelers when they were like 0-3 or 0-4, we're going to find a way to get to 500. And the Dolphins, who were 3-0, we're going to find a way to get to 500. And guess what? They both did. So just outrageous. You got any other thoughts on Texans franchise or week 18?
Yeah. So just to get back to the Texans, I mean, just to win that game, I guess you had to go into that saying, I guess we're okay with either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. That had to be the narrative for the coaches. And unless Lovie Smith knew that he was done after the game and was like, screw this organization, I want to just win this game. But as the rest of the players on the team, like, first off, I can't name 5 players on the team, which is why I know that they're kind of irrelevant because I'm pretty good with that stuff. But they had to go in saying, okay, we're either good with Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, whoever falls at number 2 if we do win this game. Because why would you win that game? I mean, I heard on the radio this morning, ESPN radio, I think it was Ian Rappaport saying, or not Rappaport, it was someone else. Anyway, they were saying, like, as a GM, you have to go to the coach and talk about it and be like, okay, we're going to sit our starting quarterback, who Davis Mills is not that great anyway, but you're also going to sit probably the best guys on your team just in hopes of staying competitive but still losing. Play some young guys, play guys that are probably not ready but will still keep it somewhat competitive. And then the Colts just losing that game is awful as well. But just kind of a testament to the Texans organization. Like, you have to lose that game so you have your pick of the litter. And I'm hearing some interesting things with the Bears now too, what they're going to do at 1.
I can see the Bears trading that. They need to gather some assets and build around Fields, especially if they're going to roll with him. But here's where I'll give pushback on everyone thinking the Houston Texans should lose. They could play they played their best players, and their best players are barely startable on other NFL teams. A 500 league where talent is fairly even across the board and quarterbacks are the difference maker. Like, they just don't have talent, period. Like, they don't have a ton of talent. So and the Colts suck. Like, it's not like they were playing the Chiefs or, someone really good. Like, the Colts are a terrible team. They've won 1 game since Saturday took over, and they've blown multiple second half and fourth quarter leads. We talked about that stat where they've been outscored 90 something to, like, I don't even remember what it was. They've been outscored by 80 or 90 points in the fourth quarter up until like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so the Texans coming back and winning that game, like, these guys are professionals. Like, you can call a bad game, you can have a bad scheme, you can try to mess up as a coach, but at the end of the day, these dudes are trying to get signed in the offseason. Like, if that was your job and you're a player on a bad team, you're barely startable on the Texans, you're trying to keep your career alive. And a good showing against the Colts can certainly do that. And you want to end the season on a high note. Like, I think sometimes people need to think back to, like, when they were players. Like, if you've ever been on a bad team, like, you don't care. You just want to win. You're sick of losing. You're tired of it. You just want to freaking win, even if it's at the end of the season and you have no shot at a championship. Like, I think if you grew up playing sports and you played a lot of sports, you likely ended up on a bad team and you just were sick of losing and you wanted to win. And that's what
good point.
Some of it comes down to some of these players. So, like, the Texans, it's not like I think they called a great game. I just think the Colts are garbage. The Colts suck.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it was the Colts that were looking to lose that. Plus, they went for 2 at the end of it. Like, if that goes into overtime, they could still win it in overtime or whatever. Like, there's risk there. They miss it, they get the number 1 pick. They win it, they end the season on a high note. And plus, Lovie Smith probably knows he's gone after what happened last year. So, I don't know. I think the talking heads forget, like, that what happens on the field is totally different from what's happening in a war room and conversations in the front office. Like, these dudes are in a car crash every freaking play. Like, you're not going to go belly up. Yeah,
that's a good point. And to think that they just keep getting rid of head coach after head coach every year, it doesn't make any sense to me either. But I heard an interesting take on what they could possibly do with the number 1 pick. I don't necessarily agree with this if I were a Bears fan, but talking about, and Bears didn't come out and say this, but fans have speculated. Like, what if they drafted Bryce Young and traded Justin Fields for more picks and to someone like the Saints or someone like the Jets who might be interested in that? I thought that was a pretty interesting way to potentially build around a quarterback outside of just 1 pick. And you can trade the 1 spot for multiple other picks, or you could take Bryce Young, who is probably he is a better prospect than Fields was out of college, at least, as far as NFL talent or whatever you want to call it. I think Fields is pretty darn good. But talk about taking Bryce Young at 1 and then trading Fields for, a 1 and a 3 or something like that. Thought that was just an interesting take to kind of round out my Week 18 regular season kind of stuff. So that's all I got.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the offseason for sure. Those franchises have a lot to think about, a lot to consider moving forward, and we'll be sure to I think it'll be fun. We'll discuss some of that later on in the offseason. Once we get past the Super Bowl and look towards draft season, we'll definitely talk some of that for sure. But let's get into these game previews. The first game up this weekend, Rob, we've got the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith in the playoffs. Russell Wilson is not. Hilarity at its finest. Playing the San Francisco 49ers, one of the hottest teams in the league right now. Top 5 rated team per Pro Football Focus. Top 5 in DVOA. Just a great all-around team. Brock Purdy has not given us a drop-off from Jimmy G yet. But, Rob, do you remember how the Niners opened this season? I was looking at the schedule. Have you looked at the schedule for them? Because I was trying to see. They went 2-0 against the Seahawks this year, beat them both times, and everything. But you remember how the Niners opened up? With a loss to the Chicago Bears.
To the Bears. Then they smoked the Seahawks the next week.
Yeah, and then what did they do week 3?
They lost to the Broncos.
They lost to the Broncos. I forgot. 10. How far away does that feel?
It feels like a
lifetime.
Year. Yeah,
that actually feels like 2018. Like it literally feels like a different decade. I mean, I'd forgotten that they opened up 1-2, losing to what turned out to be 2 of the worst 3 teams in the NFL. Like
they caught fire. I mean, 10 wins in a row at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the offense finally figured out enough to start putting up points, and outside of that loss to the Falcons, I mean, Chiefs make sense. Everything else has been massive winning streak since week 8. So here we are, wild card weekend. Niners looking like a potential Super Bowl contender with Brock Purdy. The Seattle Seahawks find their way, find life with a 4th down conversion from the Detroit Lions. Shout out Lion Up. And here we are. Geno Smith was a top 5 graded passer for much of the season. He finished just outside the top 5. But for much of the season, he was a top 5 graded passer. Thought the scheme was solid. Looks like the Seahawks, I think Lockett's going to be fine, getting healthier. So we'll see what they can do against this Niners defense, where they scored 7 points in the first matchup. And then in the second matchup, they scored 13. So 20 total points against that number 1 defense. It's going to be tough sledding out there through them. Give me your thoughts on this. Obviously, the Niners are favored. I think most people are going to pick them. I'll say I'm going to roll with the Niners. I don't think it's a very hard pick. We'll see if Seattle can make it competitive. I think it really does. Brock Purdy just wet the bed is what it comes down to. If he does, Seattle has a chance. But what are your thoughts on this game?
I think that's the only thing you're hoping for is for Brock Purdy not to show up. And I think he's been consistent enough for us to say that the Niners should win this game. I believe I have them going pretty far in the playoffs, so I obviously have the Niners here. But I wouldn't sleep on the Seahawks. I mean, they have some weapons. Did you know that Geno Smith set the franchise record in Seattle this year for completions, yards, and completion rate? I understand that
all 3. Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, all 3. Yeah. I understand there's an extra game for him to rack up some yards and whatnot and completions. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a guy in Russell Wilson that was there for however many years he was there, who we thought was probably a top 3 to top 5 quarterback in the NFL while he was in Seattle, and versus a guy, Geno Smith, who people wrote off after a couple years, and he was a glorified backup, and everyone wanted to stay away from Seattle players this year, and didn't have any expectations, and he goes ahead and breaks some records. Again, there's an extra game, but you have to consider the magnitude of the difference of mindset when you think about a guy like Russell Wilson versus Geno Smith. So I think that's really impressive. They had a really good season, but I do think it ends this weekend. I think the 49ers advance. That defense in San Francisco is just too dang good. They put so much pressure on the quarterback. Linebackers are great. DBs are good. I mean, when you have a guy like Bosa rushing the quarterback every single play and pretty much touching the quarterback every single play, it makes it extremely difficult. And the Niners have already saw that twice, or the Seahawks have already saw that twice this year. And and I don't think they're going to have a success on the third time. So I'll go Niners here. I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I would say Niners by at least 10, in my opinion here.
The line is actually right at 10.5. I think it's been bet down on some markets to about 9.5. I can certainly see that happening. However, I do think it's tough to beat a team 3 times in a row. I'm not picking Seattle. I just think maybe I can see them being within like a touchdown. I don't think this ends up being a double-digit game, only because I think Seattle, it's partly because it's tough to beat a team that bad like 3 times. And the 21-13 games, people remember, like that was a 2-score game until Seattle got a late touchdown in desperation mode. So it's going to be really, really tough for Seattle to come out with a win. But I think they make this game more competitive than a 10.5 point spread. So that's really all I've got to know. I will say, obviously, Niners number 1 defense in terms of yards allowed. They are, and Seattle is the number 9 offense in total yards. And the Niners have forced the most turnovers this season. Seattle has given up the 11th most turnovers at 23 on the season. So that's going to be interesting to watch if they can protect the ball and move it down the field enough to even get a few field goals and keep that game close and hold Brock Purdy and the offense that has put up the 7th most total yards this season, 5th most total yards this season. See if they can hold them. I don't think they do enough to win the game. I think they do enough to make this about a touchdown game, 6-7 point game at the end of it. But I'm with you there. Niners are a superior team. So let's move towards that Saturday night game. This is a game where the Chargers got very fortunate to get that 5 seed after Baltimore closed out the season with a couple losses. I think this is a good spot for them, although they did get blown out by the Jags earlier in the season. I think this is a good revenge spot for them. Trevor Lawrence, number 1 in expected points added since week 9 this season, been on an absolute tear. His first playoff game, Justin Herbert's first playoff game. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. This is actually one of my favorite matchups this weekend. Yep. It's 2 small teams that typically don't get, you got a small market team in Jacksonville. You got the Chargers, the secondary LA team. I think people would view them as that. But I do think this is probably my favorite matchup of the weekend. We got a couple good ones. Ravens, Bengals will be interesting if Lamar plays. Obviously, Dallas, Tampa Bay we'll get to. But I think Herbert and Lawrence, 2 up-and-coming quarterbacks that I think look great. You love Herbert. We both love Herbert. I think you love him more than me. Trevor Lawrence has really come into his own and broken away from Urban Meyer. Chargers are a 1-2 point favorite in this game on the road in Jacksonville. Give me a little bit of a breakdown here as these 2 teams come into the playoffs pretty hot. Remember, you had a 3-7 Jags and a 5-6 Chargers team. Maybe it was 6-5 when we talked about them needing to go on a win streak. So give me your thoughts on this matchup Saturday night.
You hit it right on the head. I love the Chargers, but it's hard to deny the Jaguars and what they've done. They're on a 5-game win streak, and they're looking as good as they have since Trevor Lawrence has been there. So I think they do make a case to win this game. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Herbert's very comfortable at home. I think it's going to set up for a really nice matchup next week with the Chargers and the Chiefs, which has ended twice this year by 3 points. Chiefs took both of those games, and I think the Chargers want a third crack at that. So a big thing to look out for, though, and it's really unfortunate that this happened again last week, but Mike Williams going down with another injury. He definitely did not need to play in that game last week, and they rolled him out, and he got injured. And really just stupid decision by Staley, but it is what it is. He's day-to-day right now. I think he makes Herbert that much better. I think if you consider Herbert, an 8 out of 10 on the talent scale, he goes up to a 9.5 when you put Mike Williams on the field. Like he makes that much of an impact. So that'll be a really big piece if Mike Williams can't play. But I still will take the Chargers regardless. I think Eckler carries a big load. I think Keenan Allen carries a big load, and I think Herbert will get the job done. Gerald Everett has really come into his own this year in that offense as well, and the defense looks pretty decent right now as well. So I think I think they just have more firepower than the Jaguars, and I think that's what a lot of these games come down to in the playoffs. I think the good offensive teams, especially in the AFC, we've seen the last couple of years have really prevailed, and I think that's what's going to happen again this weekend. So I'll take the Chargers. I think it'll be a touchdown or less. I really do think it'll be a close game, but I'll take Herbert and the Chargers to move on to Kansas City next weekend.
Yeah, I'm really torn on this just because of how well coached the Jags have been towards the end of the season, how good Trevor Lawrence has been. And yeah, that Mike Williams call is just stupid. So stupid. And the excuses were worse when so many teams found a way to sit their starters. Just so ridiculous with nothing on the line at that point. You had the seed locked up. It's very frustrating because you want these teams to be at full strength, especially these high-powered offenses. You want them to be at full strength coming into the playoffs. Justin Herbert, second overall in total yards for quarterbacks, total passing yards for quarterbacks this season. Trevor Lawrence, ninth in passing yards. Interesting thing about Justin Herbert, second in passing yards with one of the lower touchdown percentages, only 25 touchdowns this year. That places him at 21st for touchdown percentage at 3.6. And one issue with that offense this year has been not letting him throw deep, not letting him be super aggressive. They've been able to find a way around that. I think that was something that harmed them last year. We've seen it happen again this season. That gives me concern going into this weekend because I think you got to let Herbert be aggressive, especially come playoff time. And I'm a little concerned that they're not going to let him be aggressive. Whereas Trevor Lawrence, you've seen him get more aggressive as the season goes, get more confident. So it's going to be a good clash. I am going to roll with the Chargers here. I do think that line, 1-2 points is pretty accurate. I think this game's within a field goal because these two teams are.
Yeah.
I don't think one is that much better than the other one. I just think at this time, I'm making this decision based off of Justin Herbert. I'm purely making off of Herbert. However, I'm nervous about that offensive scheme, and I trust Doug Peterson a little more. So that's what gives me hesitancy, but I'm going to stick with the Chargers as well for this one. I think it's going to be a great game. Hopefully they can put up some points as well. But let's move on to the Sunday games. I think the couple of these previews are going to be pretty quick, especially this one, Bills-Dolphins. Yeah. Honestly, Tua's already been rolled out. It looks like Skylar Thompson's going to start this game. Real disappointing end to the Dolphins season. And honestly, we'll have to talk in the offseason, like we'll see in the offseason what happens with Tua. I think he ends up coming back and everything, but some scary concussions for him this season. I mean, unless it's just an absolute miracle and the Bills leave half their team in the locker room, I can't see the Dolphins being that competitive for 4 quarters, a half, maybe 3 quarters. But, I mean, the line for this one right now is -13, opened up at 10.5, it's sitting right around -13. I think that's pretty accurate. Normally these big lines, it's like, wow, it's the NFL, it's pretty even. But without Tua, it's really tough. I mean, the defense is going to if they're going to keep it close, the defense is going to have to do some incredible things and hold the Bills to like 20 points. Like, that's the only way to keep it close. The defense has to hold the Bills to like 20 points. And that's my thoughts on this game. I mean, there's not much to say apart from that for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think there's much else for me to add. This feels like a 35-10 or 35-14 type of game where the Bills kind of just get a nice and easy first-round game. I think if Tua's playing, and this is a couple weeks ago, where he's healthy and everyone's healthy on that team, this is a totally different conversation. But going to Buffalo from Miami, it's going to be cold. It's going to be nasty. Bills love that. They're used to it, and I think they're playing with a chip on their shoulder now. So I think this will be the least interesting game, I think, this weekend as far as all these games go. And I think the Bills move on pretty easily.
I think so, too. The Bills are second to the Niners in total yards allowed this season. It's going to be really tough. 4th overall in turnovers forced. So it's going to be tough for the Dolphins to really make this competitive. Let's move on to this Minnesota and New York game where I could see New York winning this one. We've talked about Minnesota being fairly fraudulent. They've had an incredible season. How do you feel about Minnesota coming into the playoffs? They've had a great season. I think they're 11 or 12-0 in these one-score games, which is something, they can worry about that next year where that's tough to be consistent with. But they're running hot this season, and I'm taking them to beat the Giants this weekend. I think they get the win at home, but I can see this being one of the closest games this weekend. And the line is actually just -3, I believe. Currently -3 Minnesota's way. So I think everyone kind of knows that these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Dabo is likely coach of the year. Kevin O'Connell, let's not forget, he's done a great job with the Vikings.
Yeah.
But we kind of know they're not elite. What say you?
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about that a lot over the weeks where we did not really consider the Vikings in our for real column. I think they made it 1 week. I think I might have put them in there 1 week, but we talked about it 2 weeks ago as well. Like, there's too many of these games where they win by one score, or they win by some kind of miracle at the end of the game. That luck eventually runs out. I think so many people are on the Giants though this weekend. I think people are almost expecting the Giants to win. Which I think is the wrong mindset. You cannot forget that the Vikings offense is really good. I mean, Dalvin Cook is going to be going up against the run defense that's not that strong. You have the best wide receiver in football in Justin Jefferson going against probably Adoree Jackson, who's coming back his first week back from injury this week. He's going to take advantage of that. I think O'Connell's going to take advantage of that, scheming Jefferson in a lot of different ways. And then Hawkinson's been a really good ad for them as well. So I think there's just too much offense for the Giants to keep up with. I'm taking the Vikings in this one, which feels like to me against what everyone else is taking. I feel like me and you are going Vikings here, but a lot of people, all I've been hearing on the radio is, the Vikings should win this game. The Giants should win this game. Rex Ryan said the Giants are going to win. He's no question in his mind. I've heard it from a couple other people. I think too many people are on the Giants, and I think the Vikings are gonna sneak one out here, which feels weird to say that they're gonna sneak one out. They're 8-1 at home. They're really good at home. Giants are 4-4 on the road, so they're 500. Giants just got into the playoffs. We've talked about the NFC East a lot this year and how we don't think they're actually that great, outside of maybe the Eagles and sometimes the Cowboys. I have my own thoughts on the Eagles. We'll get to that in a few, but yeah, give me the Vikings here in a close one, but I think there's just too much offensive power there, and I don't think the Giants' offense is that much of a threat. I think Daniel Jones and Saquon are pretty darn good, but they're more of a ground attack than they are air attack, and I think the Vikings' offense just will put too many points up, and Giants won't be able to catch up. I think it'll be close, though, with that said.
Yeah, I think it's important not to forget that neither of these defenses are that good. Wink Martindale sends a lot of pressure, and I think that's actually going to benefit Justin Jefferson after a poor showing to wrap up the season. When you're sending a lot of pressure, you're putting your defense in man situations, and Wink Martindale is known for having one of the highest blitz rates in the league. I do believe he had the highest this season. Again, I'd have to go back and look, but I think that creates a serious problem, and I think the explosive potential of the Vikings passing offense is going to be able to handle that. I think it's going to be a big Justin Jefferson game, and I think they're going to be able to jump out to a bit of a lead, and I do think they're going to handle the Giants. I agree with you. I think with all the hype going towards the Giants, they've had a great season. I mean, we've talked about it. They've overachieved, and I think Dabo has to be coach of the year. I mean, if he's not coach of the year, it's absolutely criminal because of how impressive he's been with this team. But let's not forget that the Giants have been in a lot of close games, and they've been fortunate as well. When they jumped out to that 5 or 6 win start earlier in the season, their games were very close, and they had to have things break their way. So the Vikings aren't the only team in this matchup that were fortunate early on in some one-score games. I think that's important to remember. The Vikings give up a lot of yards, so Daniel Jones and Barkley are going to have opportunity. They've given up second most yards this season, but the Giants have given up the 8th most yards defensively, and I think that they're going to have opportunities to have some explosive plays on Minnesota's side. Giants give up 5.6 yards per play. That's 9th worst in the league. And it's going to be opportunistic out there for the Vikings offense. So if you're giving me a bit of a shootout, I'm taking the Vikings. I know the Giants slow the game down, but this is in a dome, can turn into a track meet. I don't know that it's going to be like a 37-33 type game, but I think the Vikings can get to 30 points right here, and I have a hard time believing Daniel Jones can put up 30 points to contend. So that's kind of my thoughts on this game. We'll talk about the Vikings more next week, where it's going to be very difficult for them if they have to go out to San Francisco. But for now, I think they're going to get through this weekend as we roll our analysis towards Cincinnati and Baltimore. This one's an enigma because Lamar continues not to practice. I believe he was out again yesterday. I don't think he was going to practice today. I know our guy Jeff at Raven Up is just absolutely losing his mind. I'm perplexed. I mean, if Lamar doesn't play, I give the Ravens no shot. Even if he does play, how healthy is he? Like we talked early in the season, the Ravens are a top 5 team in DVOA. They are scary. They are downright dangerous come playoff time because they can grind people out. And we know that Lamar is very explosive, and it would be interesting to see if he can make something happen come playoff time, because his couple appearances in the past have been all for naught. A little disappointment for sure. However, I think they could be extremely dangerous if they were healthy at the quarterback spot. They are not. And if Lamar doesn't play, like Bengals by 20, honestly. Like I don't think the game's going to be all that close, even if Harbaugh schemes up enough to keep it competitive. What are your thoughts on this game? Give me your thoughts on this game, like if Lamar plays, because I'm going to make the assumption that if Lamar doesn't play, your thoughts are non-existent, and it's Bengals on to the next round to play Buffalo.
Yeah, that's a good assumption. And honestly, if Lamar plays, I'm not worried. I think I think Bengals win this one. I think they're too good. Hot take, maybe. I think the Bengals are the best team in football right now. I think they look really good. I think they're being overlooked by the Chiefs and by the Bills. But before that DeMar Hamlin injury a couple weeks ago now, the Bengals were kind of handling the Bills, it looked like. They had a really good first quarter. They marched down the field, scored with no problem. I think the Bengals are really, really, really good, and I think a lot of people are underestimating them. I think they were here last year. They made a run, and I think they're going to make a run again. So I'm taking Bengals regardless of Lamar plays. Regardless if Lamar was 100%, I'd still take the Bengals. I think they're that good, and I think they're going to continue with this winning streak that they have going. So give me the Bengals. I don't care about what I forget who said it. I think Isaiah Likely might have said it, that the result last week is not going to be the same result this week. I think it's going to be the same result, if not worse. And don't quote me on that. I think it was him. I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be the same result, if not worse, for the Ravens. So unfortunately, I mean, the Ravens had a really good year. I think had they not been so injury ridden, that they would have had a better shot. And we had them in our, as one of our top contenders at one point. And I think they would have stayed there throughout the year if they stayed healthy. But unfortunately, Lamar goes down. The rest of the team kind of goes down with him. So give me the Bengals by at least double digits, in my opinion.
Yeah, to make this game competitive, the Ravens are going to have to really slow down the game and grind it out. Because the Bengals, they've got a top 10 defense this season. I think they're 6th in yards allowed defensively. And, last year the Bengals struggled defensively and figured it out right at the end. Whereas this year they had to figure it out offensively, and the defenses looked a lot better overall, looked improved, which I think is scary for the rest of the AFC, which is, kind of what you are leaning into in terms of Bengals being, one of the scariest teams. And you're right, they were handling the Bills during that first quarter. So it's hard to argue with you there. I think if Lamar plays, this game is pretty close. I think if he doesn't play, I mean, the Ravens need a couple lucky breaks early on. Here's what's got to happen if Lamar doesn't play. Let's at least play out this scenario. If he does not play, the Ravens have to have a fortunate scripted scenario break their way early on, maybe preferably a touchdown, go up 7-0. If they can get 10 first half points, maybe get off a field goal, they're at 10 and play with the lead, they could potentially be dangerous because they're going to slow that game down, grind it out, and force the Bengals to beat them like 16-13 or 13-10, something excruciatingly painful to watch is what they're going to force them to do. That's the path to success for them. We in DFS, we talked a lot about identifying a path for success if you're going to select a player. If we're looking at a positive outcome for Baltimore this weekend, and that what's overall is a talented roster, that's what it's going to have to be. You're going to have to get the ball first and script your way into an early touchdown. And that defense, which has been pretty good overall this season outside of the first couple weeks, can really, really eat up the Bengals offense and make, force a couple turnovers. Do you and I think that's going to happen? No, but that's the path to success if Lamar doesn't play. And even if he does play, you're not sold at all. I'm a little more sold than you because of what he brings to the table. He's just more dynamic. He adds an element of explosiveness to that offense. He can get Andrews the ball down the field. He can get those. He could push the ball downfield a little more, and I think that adds a little bit of explosiveness to it where it makes them dangerous. But I think they could potentially win if he was fully healthy, but it doesn't look like he is. So that's it on the Ravens-Bengals game, and that's going to send us to our final game this week, man. Cowboys-Bucks. I don't even know if I want to talk about this game, but we're going to have to because it's probably going to be the most watched game of the weekend, and it's one everyone wants to talk about. Dallas is currently a 2.5-point favorite. Immediate curse. I'm going to be very negative, mainly because I will not buy into it.
All
people
right.
at work yesterday.
You be the negative guy.
People at work yesterday were trying to get me to buy in, and including my boss. They're all Eagles fans, by the way. I know they just want me to buy in and have hope so I can be crushed. And so when I go into work next week, they're just like, oh, yeah, Cowboys suck. So I'm not going to fall for it, guys. I won't be happy no matter what. I will not enjoy this game. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Bucks because lifelong Dallas fan. I know it's going to happen. I've seen it. I've seen this movie before, and the only time it had a happy ending was against a more unfortunate franchise in the playoffs, the Detroit Lions. I'm not calling Dallas an unfortunate franchise by any means. They just always in the playoffs are. Yeah. So I didn't get to grow up watching the Dallas Cowboys win Super Bowls. I was 3-4 years old last time they won a Super Bowl. I'm not sure if that counts. So my entire life has been absolute heartbreak. It's been interceptions in Week 17 against Washington, against Philly, to finish up 8-8 or 9-7 and miss the playoffs. It's been letting the clock expire. It's been Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball deep on a deep out and breaking hearts. It's been a lot of that. So I really do look forward to Monday night when Brady drives down the field and they win by a touchdown or so, and then Dallas gets the ball back like 30 seconds. They have two good plays. They get down to the opponent's 40, and they've got one shot. They'll give you enough hope to give you one shot at the end zone, just a little bit of hope, and it'll get intercepted. Dak's like 30th interception in the last 4 weeks, and we'll go into the offseason. We'll talk about McCarthy's job. We'll talk about a lot of things, and nothing will change, and it'll stay the same. And they'll probably keep Zeke instead of cutting Pollard, just letting him just tear it apart next season. So there's your 2023 playoff prediction and 2024 season prediction for the Dallas Cowboys, brought to you by Around the League podcast. Rob, I know you disagree with that, but that's it. No stats, nothing involved here. I'll give you all the stats and everything you need for everything else for this one. You know what's coming. I know it's coming. We all know it's coming. I'm gonna let you take it from here.
That's was tough to hear. That was tough to hear.
That's it.
I don't know what to say.
That was therapy.
I'll try to give you some confidence. I'll try to give Dallas fans some confidence.
I'm on to basketball season. Just
whatever. All right. So Cody's checked out. He's angry at this point. I had a lot of good things to say about this game. Now I am kind of lost.
Say them. I'll take my headphones out. No, I'm just kidding.
All right.
Go ahead.
Here's my prediction. And I'll round it out with my entire playoff prediction because this is the last game. I believe that despite the Cowboys getting blitzed by the Bucks week 1 in Dallas, I got the Cowboys winning this one. I got them moving on. And the way the rest of my bracket plays out is they'll play in Philly next weekend. But anyway, I like the Cowboys. I've liked them all year. I've said it time and time again. I've tried to get them on our for real list a couple different weeks, and it was totally shot down by Cody, understandably. But I like the Cowboys. I think they're really good. I think they're really talented, and I think they just had a tough couple of weeks the last month of the football season. I think their defense is really solid. I think they played down to their level the last couple of weeks, and I think they're going to pick it up this week. You know how I feel about the Bucs. I can't stand the Bucs this year. I am so done with them. The fact that they won the division or getting a home game after an abysmal season, it just really makes me angry. I think Brady had a good year statistically. I think they were bit by the injury bug quite a bit. And I don't see them making noise this year. I think Brady moves on potentially this offseason. I think this is his last game as a Buccaneer potentially. But I got the Cowboys moving on. I think the narrative's going to change. I don't like the matchup for the Cowboys. I think the matchup for the Cowboys with the Eagles is actually a better matchup than it is with the Bucs. But I think they're going to get a win here. I think Tony Pollard has emerged as a really good player in this league since they've played the Bucs the first week. And I just think the Cowboys are going to win. I think their offense is too good. I think their defense is good enough, and I think they're going to make some noise in the playoffs, actually. So I'll kind of move on to that. So I got Dallas winning this one. So they're going to move on to Philly next weekend. And then I got, as we talked about, I got Minnesota, and I got San Fran winning. So that, and I'll post this on Twitter later, but that's going to be followed up by a San Fran win against Minnesota next week. And I have the Dallas Cowboys beating the Philadelphia Eagles next week in Philly. We're gonna talk about that more next week. That's where the run ends for me, though. I think the San Francisco 49ers are going to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. Out of the AFC, obviously the Chiefs have a bye. I picked the Chargers this week. I picked the Bengals this week, and I picked the Bills this week. I have the Chiefs beating the Chargers in a really, really close game next week, just like the last two outings. I think the Chiefs are just a really good playoff team, and I think Herbert's going to get his first win, but I think it's going to stop there. And then I have the Cincinnati Bengals beating the Buffalo Bills next week in Buffalo. I think they're kind of going to finish that game that was not played last week. Wasn't played for the right reasons, but obviously now they have to play in the playoffs. So I think the Bengals are going to take that one. I think they're going to go to Kansas City, and I think they're going to beat Kansas City again. Burrow's going to establish his dominance in the AFC. They're going to go to the Super Bowl, and they're going to take down the 49ers. 24-21, Cincinnati Bengals are Super Bowl champs. That's what I'm sticking with, and we'll see how that pans out.
Score and all. A return to the Super Bowl for the Bengals. We hadn't seen a Super Bowl loser return since Brady did it after they lost to the Eagles, right? I think that was his.
Yeah, I just think they're that good. I think they're the best team right now, and I think the Niners are the best team in the NFC. I think Brock Purdy will do enough for them to win, and that's my prediction. I think the Super Bowl is going to be a lower scoring game if that's the case because of that defense. It reminds me a lot of last year's Super Bowl, but I think the Bengals are going to get this one. They probably learned a little bit from their loss last year, the Rams, and the Rams certainly they don't learn a thing because they're the worst team in the NFL now after winning a Super Bowl. But Cincinnati, I think, takes this one. AFC is absolutely loaded. The next round of the AFC, if the games do pan out that way, you got Herbert versus Mahomes, Burrow versus Allen, probably the four best young quarterbacks in the NFL. Maybe the four best young quarterbacks in the NFL, like in that span of age in the history of the NFL. You got to make that argument. So, and if it's not Herbert, it's Trevor Lawrence, who's not far behind. So we got really good football coming up this weekend and the next couple weekends to come. So I'm pumped.
I'm rolling with Bills and Eagles in the Super Bowl. The original Super Bowl favorite coming into this season was the Buffalo Bills, extremely talented team. Obviously, I think they were pretty much our number one team for most of the season. What Burrow does in the playoffs and in clutch time is, he is like the epitome of cool, calm, collect. It's actually super impressive. I think getting back to the Super Bowl in back-to-back seasons is extremely difficult. I think they may have a hiccup along the way. But I think the Bills get them, and it's not just that. It's not really. I'm not predicting this because they're like playing for Hamlin or anything. I do think that overall they're the best team in the AFC. By the way, can we just hit on? We'll talk more about it next week. But what Mahomes has done this season is nothing short of incredible. Like he's absolutely had like one of the best seasons to date, and they've been able to do it without Tyreek Hill. Like him and what Reed has drawn up, him buying into the system, being more patient, like that's scary. Like that's, to me, it's between Chiefs and Bills for this as well. And it's so tough for me to sway from Mahomes because of what he's done this year. He's fully bought into the system. I think it's tough. I'm almost convincing myself here, but I'm going to stick with Bills Eagles at the moment. You actually view the Eagles as frauds coming into the season. You think you were calling them fraudulent over the weekend. Give me your thoughts on the Eagles. You've got the Cowboys beating them, and how dare you do that to me? By the way, like how dare you do that to me? I'll let it slide because it's been done to me enough. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles? You see them bowing out in the divisional round to Dallas. I'm not stunned at that just because I'm not stunned at anyone in the NFC losing at all. It's such a wide open conference. I could see really anyone making a run. I could see Dallas or Tampa Bay, the winner of that game, making a run, a serious run, all Dallas stuff aside. You could see, Brock Purdy having a complete meltdown and Seattle getting a win and then, eking past them. So I do think that the Eagles find a way to get towards Super Bowl. They looked a lot better with Hurts back in the lineup. Great overall roster. Bills, Eagles, two of probably the most talented rosters in the league. But why don't you close us out talking about why you think the Eagles are going to slip up in that divisional round?
You know what, man? I'm gonna hold on to that for a week. I'm gonna let the fans chew on that because I have my reasoning. I have it right in front of me right now, right in my brain. All the reasons I believe the Eagles are going to finish with the same amount of playoff wins this year as the New York Jets. I believe it's going to happen, and I'm going to let people come up with ideas, but I'm going to stick with my ideas until next week, and we're going to see what happens. But that's what I'm going to leave it with. But go Bengals.
I haven't heard this reason, by the way, for the listeners out there. Rob just texted me after the games on Sunday, just Eagles are frauds. That's it. Eagles are frauds. And I was like, whoa, that escalated real quick. So you kind of been leaning that way for a couple of weeks, though. But, we'll definitely talk more about it next week. That's going to be fun. These games in general are going to be a great time. Dude, playoff football, these podcasts are always a ton of fun because there's so much to unpack. To a point, it's fun to analyze and everything, but come playoff time, coaches are reaching into their bag, pulling a lot out. It's must-win scenarios, win or go home. So it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to see the creative coaches do some interesting things this weekend. It's going to be fun to see how physical teams can be when they come out of the gate. You got to step it up a notch come playoff time, especially for some of those cold weather games. So we'll see what happens. Both of our Super Bowl winners are playing this weekend. Neither of us are taking the number one seed this season. Rob, man, I appreciate you jumping on here. You know where you can find him, at RobMcW24. You can find me at Cody Ingle. Check us out at rosterupmedia.com. We got some playoff teams recording podcasts. Go check them out. Eagle Up. The Eagles will be covering their team next week. Giant Up, dropping theirs. I'm sure it's going to be a fun podcast. They got Sam Prince on there again. So go check out some of those teams if you got a team in the playoffs. And as always, thanks for tuning in. See you next week.